So today I want to talk about Assad. That's in Bashar al-Assad, is the son, the fine successor of Hafiz al-Assad. And we all know that Hafiz al-Assad has murdered 250,000 people up to date. So I just want to add that Bashar al-Assad is the darling of the Bolshevik media around here, and there's a lot of support for Bashar al-Assad, the man who murdered 250,000 people, including 2,000 Palestinian Nazis, and no one talks about that. I just want to, today I want to talk about the early days when he took over. His father Hafiz al-Assad took over actually in 1966. That was the first coup of the Ba'ath Party, 1966. 1970 they did the second coup d'etat with the Ba'ath Party, and Hafiz al-Assad became dictator for 30 years up until his death in 2000. And in 2000 Bashar al-Assad took over. And I just want to stress out some facts about the early days when he took over, 2,000 years. And I'm quoting some facts from the book of Mordecai Kedar, in search of Assad in Search of Identity. So now the reason why Assad, father and son, are searching for an identity within Syria, modern day Syria, is because the Alawis, the sect called the Alawis, are only 10% of the population. Now the Christians in Syria are more numerous than the Alawis. And then there's the Druze, the Kurds, and the Sunni, who are the majority. Over 60% of the Syrians are Sunnis. And it's the Sunnis who are fighting Bashar al-Assad today. So the first thing that Bashar did when he took over is that he fixed his relationship with Iraq. Now there was good reason why Syria was an enemy of a sworn enemy of Iraq, Saddam Hussein. It was because Syria was backed by Iran, the Ayatollah. It was backed by the Ayatollahs who took over in 1979. That's 9 years after Hafiz did his coup d'etat, and they were Shiites. And the Alawis are an offshoot of Shia Islam, which means that Syria in 1979 became a proxy of Iran, just like Hezbollah became a proxy of Iran in the 1980s, and the Palestinian groups. So the first thing that Bashar al-Assad did in 2000, in the summer of 2000, is that he became a friend and ally of Saddam Hussein. And there was some, back then there were some articles saying how long could Iraq stay under the international? How long will the Iraqi people continue to be victims of the rapacious siege? And of course, it's all anti-West and anti-American and anti-Israeli propaganda. Of course, what else? What remained the same after Bashar al-Assad took over was the desire to take over the Golan Heights, even though, of course, the Syrians, the Arab Syrians at least, have nothing to do with the Golan Heights, but they want it anyway, because they want to expand it. And even though Israel gave them Quneitra, the city of Quneitra, that was a big mistake. As well as leaving southern Lebanon, that was a big mistake too. Now, as regards the policy of Israel, in contrast with the Iraqi example, Syria's relations with Israel in the first months of Bashar's rule remained as bad as they had been, and may actually have worsened. Bashar al-Assad seems to have understood that the animosity towards Israel was so ingrained and widespread among Syrians that he could not reduce it unless he succeeded in getting the Golan Heights back. And therefore, it would be better for him to take advantage of attitudes towards Israel to gain legitimacy by being more outspoken and perhaps even taking stronger action against Israel. So an easy way, how can, at the 10% of Syria, that's 1.5 million people, gain the sympathy of the Sunni majority was to be anti-Israeli, do all this propaganda. And He had the example of Hezbollah to consider, who by their uncompromising resistance to the Israeli occupation of South Lebanon brought about the liberation of that strip of land and the destruction of the South Lebanese army that had collaborated with Israel. And that was 2000. It was in 2000 that Bashar Assad took over, and in 2000 the Jews sadly withdrew from Lebanon. And of course, Lebanon is Phoenicia. It has nothing to do with the Arabs, just like the Golden Heights has nothing to do with the Arabs or Islam, whether it's Sunni or Shia. As early as his inauguration speech, Bashar al-Assad made it quite clear that he would make no concessions in the Golan, nor would Syria make any concessions in respect of Palestinian and Arab rights. He declared many times that Syria would not agree to a peace with Israel for as long as it did not withdraw from all the territories that it seized in 1967, meaning the Golan, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. Of course, Gaza Strip became Palestinian in 2005, that's 5 years later. The book wasn't even written then. Anyway, and thus taking upon himself the guardianship of the Palestinian problem. I must remind people that his father, Hafez al-Assad, tried to murder Yasser Arafat, and they also killed the guy who was before Yasser Arafat. They threw him off a building and they killed him off. And that's since 1966, when the party took over, the Ba'ath Party took over. And then he killed lots of Palestinians in the recent war right now. But back in 2000, he was pro-Palestinian. Ha ha ha. How, anyway, opportunistic it could be. Right, so he even made use of Islamic symbols in his invective against Israel. In his aggressive speech at the summit meeting of leaders of Islamic countries in Al-Dawa, Qatar, in November 2000, 6 weeks after the outbreak of the Al-Aqsa Intifada. Now let's remind people that in 2000, 1993, the Jews sadly signed the Oslo Accords, which was treason by Yitzhak Rabin and Simon Peres. And despite that, and as a thank you, for bringing back Yasser Arafat and all these Fatah terrorists and all these terrorists in the West Bank, as a thank you, when Ariel Sharon visited the Temple Mount, the Second Intifada took place, in the same period when the Jews withdrew from Lebanon. And so Bashar al-Assad started supporting the Palestinians and Hezbollah, the proxies of Iran, just like himself, being himself a proxy, of course. So in November 2000, 6 weeks after the outbreak of the Intifada, the Second Intifada, he adopted the Palestinian rhetoric and claimed Israel was planning to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Not the Mosque of Omar, Al-Aqsa, the farthermost mosque. And he compared his actions to those of the Nazis. Bashar al-Assad backed up his words with deeds. In a lead story in 13th December 2000, reported on President Assad's instructions and in honor on the month of Ramadan, more Syrian aid for the heroes of the Intifada. Right. So no wonder he's the hero, the darling of the Bolshevik left-wing people here in Greece. Of course. The article reports how representatives of the Palestinian Authority in Amman, Rabat Amman, Jordan, received financial assistance from the Minister of State for the Syrian Red Crescent. What is interesting about the article is that it shows that Syria is prepared to cooperate publicly with the Palestinian Authority, despite the fact that from its inception in 1994, that's the Oslo Accords, Syria had been opposed to its establishment and activities and agreements signed with Israel since the Palestinian independence left Syria behind with the Golden Heights still in Israeli hands. Of course, the Oslo Accords said nothing about the Golden Heights, which for some obscure reason the Syrians still claim. Right. And let's not forget that Arafat was a persona non grata in Damascus, and occasionally the object of curses and derision, mostly by Mustafa Talas, the Syrian Minister of Defense. Now, with the outbreak of the Intifada in September 2000, the peace process between Israel and the Palestinians seemed to come to a dead stop, giving Syria another opportunity to cooperate and stand with the PLO and give shelter and protection to the Palestinian opposition leaders. Most notably from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who were opposed to the peace process between Israel and PLO initiated by the 1993 Oslo Accords. Right, it seems that Bashar adopted the approach of there will be no peace for the region without Syria, there will be no peace without Syria's active involvement. A number of meanings can be attached to this. If Israel accepts the Syrian conditions, it will be able to live in peace, and if it does not accept them, then a state of war will continue even that there are no actual hostilities. Syria has the right to do everything it can to prevent other forces, Lebanon, for example, making peace with Israel. Of course, Lebanon, half of Lebanon was under Syrian control at the time. The reason why hashish, the drugs in the Bekaa Valley, of course. What else? That's what Hezbollah is all about. Narcotics in the Bekaa Valley, of course. Syria will continue to support Hezbollah and Palestinian organizations opposed to the peace process with Israel, and will help them in every way possible in the war against the Zionist entity. So see, it's the evil Zionists, of course, in the Arab propaganda. The Syrian Alawi propaganda. For as long as Israel does not accept serious conditions for peace, it should be noted here that these terms are a complete withdrawal from the Golan to the line of full June 1967, the Six-Day War, and the restoration of full Syrian sovereignty to the area, including land west of the international line that Syria captured illegally between 1949 and 1967. Israel's recognition of Syrian sovereignty over the part of the Sea of Galilee, compensation for Syrian residents in the Golan, and there were no Syrians. Actually, there were Druze there, but not Syrians there, in the Golan Heights. And there still are several Druze living there, 20,000 to be exact. Right, and the Palestinian refugees who have been living in Syria and Lebanon since 1948, numbering close to 500,000 people. These conditions are presented. So, Bashar al-Assad very quickly realized, he discovered that Israel can be an important and permanent source of legitimization if he takes an extreme and uncompromising political line against it, and helps Lebanese and Palestinian forces working against it for their own private reasons. He therefore wanted to reap the benefit of an anti-Israeli activity without being accused of direct involvement and without paying too high a price. He considered Israel's air attacks and Syrian installations in Lebanon to be a reasonable price to pay. And they even lent power to the claim that Israel was the aggressor and with whom it was impossible to have peaceful relations, let alone normalization. The Intifada that erupted in the September 2000, the harrowing scenes of fighting in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the destruction of numerous Palestinian casualties shown on satellite television channels led to a wave of hatred and anger against Israel throughout the Arab and Muslim world. Bashar al-Assad, in his quest for popular legitimacy, decided to ride this wave, to refer to it in his speeches and proclamations, and to use the hatred towards Israel as a source of legitimacy. From this also stems the Syrian media's custom of portraying Bashar the conscience of the nation, and this was the line taken by the editorial, Zionism and Nazism. So, yeah, and they did several cartoons portraying Jews as Nazis. A cartoon in October 2000 portrayed an Israeli rabbi teaching Adolf Hitler in the art of war. This political and media line taken by Bashar in the first few months of his rule could scarcely have led him to a peace of compromise with Israel, but in the first period of his rule, he needed public sympathy and popular legitimacy more than he needed peace. The Palestinian Intifada gave him that opportunity to stand with the Arab masses, demonstrating in the streets and assume control of the furious anger they felt towards Israel. Now, and that's 2000. It's 4 years later, Bashar al-Assad, he killed several Kurds who tried to demonstrate. So these are the early days of Bashar al-Assad, and then there's a 3-year civil war, which he killed 250,000 people. Of course, opposing him are the al-Nusra, who are Al-Qaeda. They were equally evil. They were just as evil as Assad is. So, the al-Nusra, who are Al-Qaeda, are equally cruel and evil, like Bashar al-Assad, like his father Hafiz al-Assad. And in the civil war, like we said, in the early days, he supported the Palestinians, but in the civil war, he killed over 2,000 of them in the concentration camps. in the apartment blocks they have. So no one talks about that, of course. He still backs the Hezbollah, the proxy of Iran. He is backed by Iran now in the civil war, and now he has to face ISIS, who is, and ISIS is also cruel and evil, just like Bashar Assad is. Now here in Greece, of course, Greece is a country full of Bolsheviks. It's full of commies. It's full of socialists. And it's full of anti-Americans, anti-West, anti-Israeli propaganda. We have all these newspapers and all these articles and all these TV shows that are attacking Israel. They are attacking the West. They are attacking America. And now the Bolshevik media here are pro-Assad. They are pro-Assad. They support an Islamo-Shiite. The reason being, first of all, Assad, he gave a base to whom? He gave a naval base, that's in Tartus. He gave it to whom? The Russian Bolsheviks. So he's also a communist, as well as an Islamo-Shiite Nazi. And he also gave a base to the Russians, the Bolshevik Putin. Now in Greece, several Bolsheviks, communists, socialists, they support for absolutely no reason, instead of supporting their friends, they are backstabbing their friends in America, in Western Europe, and in England, and in Israel. And they're supporting Bolsheviks like Putin, who are trying to steal their money. So they're backing the worst enemies, and they are stabbing their friends in the back. That's what being a Bolshevik and a left-wing supporter is all about. So right now, the Bolshevik Putin is supporting Assad. So of course, the Bolsheviks are supporting Assad because of Putin. Right. And of course, they never refer to these facts. All the people he massacred, all the Kurds, all the Palestinians, all the Sunnis, all the Christians, of course. Who can forget what happened in Lebanon with Rafik Hariri and all the Christians that were killed by Hezbollah and the Syrians? And the drugs in the Bekaa Valley, of course. Everyone knows about that. Right. Now the other Islamists, the Sunnis, of course, they are evil because they're backed by Qatar, they're backed by Saudi Arabia, the king, and the emir of Qatar, of course. They are equally corrupt and evil, of course. Everyone knows that. And so people here in Greece, where I'm living right now, where I'm residing right now, should back a US Western coalition against both Assad, both ISIS, and both against the al-Nusra, because all three of them are evil. So there's no sense in backing either al-Nusra or ISIS or Assad. All three must go. And a mild Sunni government should take over in Syria. Of course, no one knows what's going to happen for sure in the civil war. Right. But they're weakening. I mean, everyone's getting weaker and weaker by the day. Al-Nusra is getting weaker, Assad is getting weaker, ISIS is getting weaker, and no one knows what's going to happen, of course, in the end. But the thing is, the Bolsheviks here in Greece envy their friends. They're stabbing their friends at the back. That's right. So they receive all this aid from America, from the West. And what are they doing? They're fighting America, and they're backing Bolsheviks like Putin and all these, and they're doing all this anti-Western propaganda. Now the true Greeks, the right-wing Greeks, of course, support the West and America. They love America. And of course, within America, there are traitors within America itself. Like all these liberals in the Democratic Party, of course. They're damaging America. They're making all these people hate America. So they're partly the blame why all these people resent America instead of backing America. All these liberals in the Democrat Party, like Jimmy Carter, Jimmy Carter is one of the reasons why these people resent America. These Bolsheviks here, and they're doing all this anti-Western propaganda, of course. Jimmy Carter, what he did in Camp David, 1979, and all these treacheries in 2005, withdrawing from Gaza, the Oslo Accords, 1993, 1994. That was betrayal, wasn't it? Betraying their friends, anyway. And but the true Greeks, the true right-wing Greeks, should back the West, Israel, and America, of course, but not these liberals in the Democrat Party. These liberals in the Democrat Party, and of course it's all. Of course, all these left-wing people right here, they also back the Palestinians, who have absolutely nothing to do with Gaza. They have nothing to do with the West Bank. Of course, they are agents of. They're just agents of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, of course. Oh, and by the way, all these liberals in America, they are slaves to Qatar and Saudi Arabia, of course. Everyone knows that. Right, this is part of the Syrian propaganda. You see, 2 Jews portrayed as Nazis. This cartoon, and here we see a rabbi teaching Hitler. So this is the mild guy. This is the mild guy, the so-called mild Arab, who was the darling of the Bolshevik media right here in Greece. And there's all this propaganda against the West. And in 2005, when he murdered, when the Syrians and Hezbollah killed Rafik Hariri, and they also killed several innocent bystanders, and all these reporters and all these Christians that they killed, they pushed it too far, and they were forced to withdraw from Lebanon, just like the Jews did 5 years earlier. But he left behind his good friends Hezbollah, the drug dealers, the murderers, and all these. And the good thing is that all these Hezbollah fighters are dying today in Syria, fighting the other animals, the al-Nusra animals, and ISIS. Bashar has no army left, basically no army left. Al-Nusra is also weak, and now there's ISIS. Now, I don't think ISIS will last long, particularly when America came in. Of course, the Bolshevik Putin claimed that he was going to fight ISIS, but of course he's not going to do so. He's waiting for America to do all the dirty work for him, and Britain, of course, and France. Of course, Hollande wants to sell some guns, doesn't he? To save us public servants, right? Right. So the future will see what will happen to this ruthless dictator, Bashar Assad, who killed 250,000 people, who, like his father, who followed the steps of his father, Hafez al-Assad, who killed 50,000 people, and of course the guy, and his father, just the last thing, his father, he was really inconsistent. He used to kill Palestinians, and then he used to ally himself to the Palestinians, and then he was pro-Palestinian again, but basically he hated Yasser Arafat. Now that's one Arab who hated Yasser Arafat. Hafez al-Assad, his father. Right, so the future will see what will happen with the 3 years civil war in Syria. And we'll hope that ISIS will fade away, and al-Nusra will fade away, and all these ruthless dictators will one day drift away, and there will be some mild Arab rulers, proxies of the West, of course. Right, so just to get an understanding of this Mr. Assad, the darling of the Bolshevik media, the friend of the pseudo-Palestinians, the friend of Hezbollah, to understand him, we must remember that a few months before the Arab Spring came along, the Civil War came along in Syria, he was talking to this lady reporter on CNN, and he said that he does not recognize the UN. And the lady reporter said, well, why do you have a representative in the UN? And he said, just for the fun of it. So just by that you can realize who this Assad is and why the Bolshevik, anti-West, anti-America, anti-Israel group of people, well,